Welcome back, everyone, to the GDFL podcast hosted by yours truly, Andrew Korn. I'm recording this at 5:30 p.m. this Tuesday, September 23rd. And after I got a positive response last week about doing a solo show, I figured I'm going to do a solo show again. This isn't to say that I'm only going to be doing solo shows moving forward, but I am going to mix them in here from time to time just because of the positive reception I received from doing it. And the first thing I want to talk about is this Lions-Ravens game where our Lions came out with a huge win, 38-30 on Monday Night Football against these Ravens. Something I wanted to call out. So Muhammad, who had 2.5 sacks and received a game ball this past week, was a part of that legendary 2017 draft class with the Saints, which I'm sure some of you have seen it on social media, or like when you look at the best draft classes post 2000, this one from the 2017 Saints is referenced often. They drafted Marshawn Lattimore, Ryan Ramczyk, Marcus Williams, Alvin Kamara, Alex Anzalone, Trey Hendrickson, and Al-Qaeda Muhammad. What a hell of a draft class, and two of these guys are currently Lions, with Anzalone and Muhammad. Had those ties to Dan Campbell back from his days with the Saints. Really, what I'm impressed with is I think both of these coordinators, Johnny Warren and Calvin Shepard, were in their bags during the game. I mean, the fourth down and fourth and goal that we ran was actually a play that the 2019 Saints ran, and the 2003 Cowboys actually also ran the same play. Common connection there is Dan Campbell was on both the 2019 Saints coaching staff and was the blocking tight end on the 2003 Cowboys when they had run that play. So I think Dan Campbell doesn't get enough credit for being the offensive genius that he is. I think he's actually more behind what's going on with the offense than what he gets credit for. Nonetheless, impressive outing. Calvin Shepard, I thought, was in his bag defensively. I mean, the Lions held the Ravens to under 100 rushing yards. I mean, other than Derrick Henry's 28-yard touchdown run, I mean, he was held to 11 carries to 22 yards otherwise. And bottling up Derrick Henry, I think, is impressive. And then Lamar Jackson also had only 35 rushing yards. Both, I think, are very impressive feats considering what the Ravens' offense has been. I came away very impressed with Johnny Morton and Calvin Shepard. I think the vibes are really good with both of them right now too, and the vibes of this team really improved after the disastrous week one that the Lions had. So love to see the Lions coming out and making a statement win. I'm also excited that the 1-2 Ravens are taking on the 1-2 Chiefs next week with Sunday Night Football. Something's gonna have to give, and one of those teams is about to be 0-3. And then moving into a recap of the past week's games, I'm going to start with my matchup with Shrew. I ended up beating Shrew 145.2 to 132.88. And this was actually a pretty interesting matchup. So going into the Sunday night slate, Shrew and I were basically tied, and he still had three players left to play, and I just had Montgomery. Shrew still had Pacheco, Tyrone Tracy, and Hollywood Brown playing in Sunday Night Football. And I didn't really think my odds of winning this matchup were going to be all that great, seeing what the stakes were at the time. Luckily for me, Pacheco, Tracy, and Hollywood combined for about 16 and a half points. And I knew that was the mark I needed David Montgomery to have. When I was looking at it, he had gotten 16 and a half points in 4 out of 14 games last year. Just so I had like kind of an idea of what my odds were of winning. It was like roughly 30% felt right. And I think sleepers odds were a little bit lower than that. But I had my Monday Night Miracle. David Montgomery balled out in Monday Night Football with 151 yards and two touchdowns. Hell of a game for Demo. I appreciate the win. Appreciate him helping out the Lions. And yeah, that was just a pretty awesome sight to see, having him ball out and give me that win. And also, the late touchdown that he had actually gave me enough points to overtake Chad as the top scorer of the week. So it's an extra $10 in my pocket. So thank you, Demo, for all your efforts. Talking over on Shrew side of things, the things that I wanted to call out were CJ Stroud has just not been that good of a fantasy quarterback for the past calendar year now. I think I saw the last time he had been a top 12 quarterback in any week for fantasy was week two of last year. A fun one is Marcus Mariota actually has three QB1 finishes in the time since CJ Stroud had his last QB1 finish, and he only started one of those games. So just want to get on my jabs on Shrew and CJ Stroud. But like the biggest takeaway is like I don't think Shrew's team is going to be a playoff team until he gets an upgrade at the running back position. Pacheco, he's been bad. Like I don't even think he's really startable at this point. I mean, it's been 3 consecutive weeks where he's been in a timeshare and he's not the goal line back. He's just he's just not been good. Hopefully, for Shrew's sake, he can turn it around. But the running back room of Pollard, Pacheco, and Tracy is looking pretty bleak right now. On to the next matchup, we have Stun beating Sokol 128 to 112. Stun's team is cooking right now. Really don't have much to say. I mean, I picked his team to be top three at the start of the season, and I have no reason to change that now. And then for Sokol, the biggest thing I have of note is Jonathan Taylor is looking like the RB1 right now, and his season right now feels very Saquon-esque of last year, where a new quarterback comes in, or in his case, Saquon went to a new team. But things are humming for that Colts offense right now. Jonathan Taylor might end up being a league winner if the way he's been playing this year. He's been balling out. Next matchup on here, I have Ryan, who beat Levi 97 to 73. Ryan kind of lucked out here that he was against Levi this week. Both Joe Flacco and Jake Browning put up pretty pathetic performances from a fantasy perspective. Well, hopefully for Ryan's sake, he gets Jaden Daniels back next week. But yeah, Flacco and Browning did not inspire much confidence this past week. To be fair for both of them, the Packers and Vikings defenses that they were against respectfully are two of the best defenses in the league. But yeah, that Bengals offense looked lousy in that game. They cannot run the ball at all, and then they just stack the box, bring pressure. Might be a long season for the Bengals this year, with Burrow being out for pretty much the entire season, if not all of it. But good things for Ryan. QJ, even though he was on his bench, QJ had a third straight pretty good week. I imagine QJ is going to be finding a spot in Ryan's starting lineup here soon. And then really the bigger ones, Trey Benson taking over as the Cardinals RB2 or RB1, probably going to be an RB2 for fantasy the rest of the season. Pretty big get for Ryan, pretty important player to be having a role on his team because he might depends on how Ryan views it. I mean, Hampton's his RB1 it seems, and then Benson may overtake Swift as the RB2. We'll have to see how each of those guys do for fantasy. But Ryan's flexes look better today than they did going into the week or going into the season. For Levi, he had both Luther Burden and Torrey Horton on his bench. I mean, it's hard to say in hindsight that starting him was the right thing to do. But I mean, starting Pop Clicks ended up not being a very good decision. Dylan Sampson's role is pretty much non-existent now. Good thing for Levi is Judkins looked like a legit bell cow back. Looked legit this past week against a very good Packers defense. So I think there's something to look forward to with Levi's roster, and I think he'll be starting Burden and Horton moving forward. We'll see though. Well, I don't really know what Levi's going to do. Up next, we have Beans versus Trevor. Trevor won 114.66 to 114.48. Trevor won by 0.18 points. That's about as close as it gets. I mean, I'm sure some of you saw in the group me. If Lamar would have converted that 2 point conversion, that would have given Beans the win. But instead, because it wasn't converted, that gave Trevor the win. Tough week for Beans. That's a tough way to lose. I mean, Lamar still had a pretty solid game. The big thing, though, I think that's come of note is Chase Brown has just not been able to run the ball effectively behind that Bengals offensive line. Going into the season, Chase Brown was a very popular pick in redraft leagues, being picked pretty early. But that injury to Burrow, and I think teams might be stacking the box against the Bengals more this year. Chase Brown might have a tough go of things moving forward. And then for Trevor, same thing with Stun. Like this team's solid. This team's good. Not really that was too much to say about Trevor's team. Up next, we have Mark beating Logan 109 to 67. For Logan, the big thing of note here is James Conner is injured. I'll touch up more on that later. He is going to get Jordan Addison back after this week, though. I don't really think that's going to make too much of a difference for Logan's team. And for Mark, he might have a bit of a QB2 problem. Both Penix and Tua have both been pretty uninspiring to start the season. I think there's a legitimate chance that Mark is starting Carson Wentz this week. I really could make an argument that he's probably the best option to start for Mark until Wentz loses his starting job. Yeah, there's something with two and Penix, just neither of them look right. It's probably because they're both left-handed, but yeah, I don't know. I usually try not to be too panicky on this and try and be optimistic, but panic meter should be higher from Mark, I think, with the performance of his quarterbacks. Mahomes has been good, but those two have been not so great. And then lastly, we have Chaz beating Jake 143 to 87. Chaz's team just continues to roll. I think he had perfect or near perfect lineup efficiency this week. I'd have to double check that though. Chaz's team's, like I said, with Trevor and Stein, his team's good. He continues to be good, and we'll see what happens moving forward. With Jake, after I praised him last week of being knowing just when to push all the right buttons and set the right players in there. He benched Trey Tucker, putting up a 37-point week, and also benched Cam Scatabo, scoring 21 points. Not a great week for Jake in terms of setting his lineup. It kind of sucks in the way things goes. I imagine those two will be in a starting lineup next week. Jake's off to an 0-3 start. We'll see what happens moving forward with Jake. But yeah, that was really what I want to call out there. So then taking a look at the standings, Chaz, myself, and Ryan are all undefeated at 3-0. Stun and Trevor are both 2-1. And then we have a glut of teams at 1-2, with Sokol currently being the sixth seed, followed by Bean, Shrew, Mark, Levi, and then both Jake and Logan are 0-3. Really, the big thing I wanted to call out here is Ryan has scored pretty much exactly one more point than Jake. Ryan just happens to be 3-0, and Jake happens to be 0-3 because Jake's team has allowed 200 more points against. That's just the way fantasy football goes. Sometimes you have higher points against, and sometimes you don't. It's a game of a little bit, a lot of luck involved in fantasy football after all. And I think the other things of note is everyone else's max points for is in the 400s range. Logan's is currently at 256, so we have a clear runaway favorite for the 101. And then Levi's is at 330.8, which is also a distance from Logan's first, but also it's about 70 back of third. So this is going to be a segment I might incorporate into future podcasts just because I think it was one that was interesting and I think might be beneficial for people in the league, might help inspire trade ideas as just a general news and injury report. So the first one I have here is CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb suffered that ankle sprain against the Buccaneers. I think they're playing the Bucks. No, they're playing the Bears. That was against the Bears. He sprained his ankle in pretty much the first drive of the game. Came back for a play and then realized he couldn't play. Uh, Reporting about this has been ambiguous. CD says he's fine and could play next week. Jerry Jones has said it might be 4 to 6 weeks. I don't really know what's going on. I'm not any kind of medical expert or Cowboys expert for that matter. Imagine Lamb's going to miss at least a few weeks here, though, just to see what'll happen. And then, yeah, I imagine George Pickens and Jake Ferguson will be getting the biggest lift in the Cowboys passing attack. But man, the Cowboys are looking pretty rough for 2025. That defense is awful. Next injury on here is Mike Evans. Mike Evans had a hamstring injury. He had a hamstring injury last year too, where that made him miss 4 weeks. Early prognosis that I've seen is that he's only going to miss 2 to 3 weeks. I'm going to lean because of his age and his recurrence of having hamstring injuries. It's probably going to be taking full time to heal up. Chris Godwin might be back for the Bucks this week, although I really just don't trust anything Todd Bowles says because he said Chris Godwin was almost back for the playoffs last year, and yet he's still not back. So who knows? Might be wheels up for Mika Egbuka for the next few weeks, though, while these guys are injured. Next, we have Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone Tracy has a shoulder injury and is expected to be out 2 to 4 weeks. It's going to be Cam Scatabo season for Jake in the upcoming weeks. And then again, it's just a loss at running back for Shrew in a position that doesn't really have much depth on his team anyway. Um, yeah, it's pretty good for Jake, though, that Scatabo is going to be getting a probably really good run here for the next couple weeks. Next two injuries I'm going to have on here are both season enders for Najee Harris and James Conner. Najee Harris ruptured his Achilles, tore his Achilles, and is going to be out for the remainder of the season and maybe into next season. James Conner had a pretty gruesome ankle break that will also sideline him the rest of the season. These are both going to be more than likely career-ending type of injuries. I just don't see either of them coming back at their current ages and going to be that productive moving forward. Might have some value, might be able to, maybe they'll be on a roster next year, is kind of where I'm at with how I think these guys are. But I think really this is like the prime example of if you're rebuilding, why you trade away older running backs if you're not contending. And I think like Logan really missed his window with Eckler. He might have been able to get something for him, then missed again with James Conner, where his season's probably over and he's not going to be able to get anything worthwhile for him now. And, even if he got a second for Connor and a third for Eckler, I mean, that's a second, a third more than he currently has in value with those two players. Um, that's why, again, like we were suggesting in some of the previous shows, that you should probably be selling old running backs or old players if you're not contending. I think that's a perfect example of why. For Najee Harris, that was a good sell. But that, again, Levi sold Najee Harris for a third like a week or two ago before his Achilles blew up. So Ryan might have lit that third round pick on fire. I mean, you can't foresee an Achilles injury like that happening. Just unfortunate. Yeah, like I said, Najee's 27, will be 28. I mean, he could recover, but I just didn't think he was that good of a running back to begin with. So we'll see what happens there. Jackson Dart announced today will be taking over the starting role from Russell Wilson. With Jackson Dart, I really think that Dable wanted to start him all along. And just like from like seeing some of the press conference snippets on Twitter where he's saying like, oh yeah, we're evaluating everything. Makes me wonder if there was some kind of power struggle between him and ownership or the front office about wanting to start him and getting in there right away. Uh, Dar really have seemed like Dable's guy all summer, just based on all the quotes that have been said. And yeah, exciting for Trevor that he's going to get a QB3 and perhaps his QB of the future playing way sooner than I was anticipating. Yeah, blow for Chaz to lose Russ, but I don't think it's anything that Chaz can't overcome with his current quarterback room. Just means he'll be, I don't think he was ever going to start Russ anyway over Darnold or Gino, but yeah, just a little bit of a loss for Chaz there. And then the last one is I saw Terry McLaurin popped up on the injury report today with an injury. I think it was a quad injury is what I saw. It might have been groin, but like some kind of soft tissue injury. Uh, Blow for Jaden Daniels. Maybe good for Debo Samuel and Mark. Uh, Obviously, a blow for Beans that he might have to take McLaurin out of his lineup this week. Yeah, that's the news and injury roundup. There wasn't any trades that have happened since our last podcast, so I'm not going to go over any. Then looking at the draft order, Logan is currently the first and two picks by a somewhat wide margin. And then we currently have Shrew at three, Beans at four, Mark at five, and Jake at six. I mean, we're still pretty early in the season. I mean, if you really want to get ahead of it and just want to tank, maybe now would be a good time to do so and to try and catch up to those picks early on. But I'm guessing most of these, like really every team between 3 through 12, I think still has a legitimate shot at the playoffs and still probably shouldn't be making a push towards it. At least for now. I mean, things are going to change over these next few weeks. But yeah, I think the draft, there's really nothing too interesting with the draft order yet. It's going to fluctuate a lot in the upcoming weeks. And then looking at our upcoming matchups, so I am against Logan, Stun is against Jake, Shrew is against Ryan, Sokol's against Beans, Levi's against Mark, and then Chaz is against Trevor. So I'm going to start at the top here. I'm against Logan this week. I don't think Logan's listening to this, but if you are Logan, we bet an ice on our redraft matchup where you beat me. I still owe that ice. I'll probably just do that at alumni weekend when we're golfing. But if you're listening to this, which I doubt, but I hope you are, I want to place a bet on our matchup. I'll even give you a 50-point spread that I will beat you. I'll give you plus 50 and I'm going to win. So hope you're listening to this. Hope everyone's listening to this. Maybe calls it out in the chat that I'm willing to give them a 50-point line and I still think I'm going to beat them. I mean, Sleeper thinks I'm winning by 55. So maybe 50 wasn't generous enough. Maybe I'll up it to 60. I'll give you a 60-point spread, Logan, that I'm going to beat you. And I'll bet a nice on it. We'll see if he responds. I doubt it. We have Stun versus Jake. So this is a big matchup for Jake. It's going to be really hard to make the playoffs if he starts 0 and 4. And Stun has about a 20-point favorite. There's about a 20-point favorite of him as of whenever I pulled this, which I think was around 2 o'clock today when I started getting ready for this. Big week for Jake. He kind of a must win. Another big one is Shrew versus Ryan. That matchup might be the matchup of the week. Their projections are the closest of any team in the league so far. Excited for that one. Big week for both of them. Beans and Sokol are currently the 6 and 7 seeds respectively. That's gonna be a big matchup for the two of them. We'll see who comes out on top there. Similarly, Mark and Levi are 9 and 10. Another big week for Mark. He's gonna have back-to-back weeks against Logan and Levi, which would get him in the win column theoretically. But I mean, Levi showed his team could be a force to be reckoned with in the right weeks. Mark's team has been off to an extremely slow start. And then lastly, we have Trevor and Chaz. Chaz, despite being the 1 seed, and there's probably still a CeeDee Lamb in his lineup, but it looks like Trevor is currently favored. I'm not going to read too much into these projections, though. Projections don't mean shit. But yeah, looking forward to this week of GDFL football. A lot of big games for a lot of people. Keep their seasons alive. And that brings me to my special segment, which I did a Who's Your Pokemon? And so I compared every team to a Pokemon. I stuck to Kanto's original 151 just because I think more people in this league will be more familiar with those Pokemon. And this isn't Who's Your Pokemon is going to be about you as your team, not you as an individual. For the most part, there might be a few exceptions here or there. Fine. Yeah, I'm excited for this one. As you guys all know, I love Pokemon. One of my favorite video games, favorite hobbies, mine. And I had a lot of fun thinking through of what Pokemon reflects each team. And I have this in reverse standings order. So I have Logan. Logan's Pokemon is Magikarp. If you don't know anything about Magikarp, Magikarp is the most useless Pokemon. All it does is splash and flop like a fish. And that's kind of what Logan's team is doing right now, is just kind of flopping around there. Not really having a great season, isn't expecting to have a good season. He's having a self-admitted tank here. So that's kind of why I picked Magikarp to be Logan's Pokemon. Up next, we have Jake. For Jake, I have Alakazam. I still think Alakazam's a psychic type, considered very smart. I think Jake pushes a lot of the right buttons. Alakazam is also a bit of a glass cannon, though. It takes one hit and they'll likely faint. That's how I feel about Jake's team. He's about an injury or two away from having the season go south quickly. Though I will say, Jake does have the best quarterback room in the league with the way Jalen Hurts and Daniel Jones have been playing to start the year. So maybe having an elite quarterback duo will keep him afloat for a little while. With Levi, I put Ditto. With Ditto, it can transform into anything, and that's kind of how I feel about Levi's team. We really don't know what it is or what it's going to be. It's still very young and inexperienced, and there's still a lot of room to grow, and it will probably get better as the season progresses with all the rookies he has. But Ditto can transform into any Pokemon. I think Levi's team can transform into anything. He's going to acquire players, he's going to trade away players, and we'll see what Levi ends up doing, like this Ditto. Up next is Mark. Mark, I have Kangaskhan. Kangaskhan's a pretty good Pokemon, pretty solid, nothing crazy. But really, the reason I picked Kangaskhan is because there's a little lad in the pouch, and Mark has a little lad McConkey. That was really the only reasoning behind me picking Kangaskhan for Mark was really just like the little lad he has there for Lad McConkey. For Shrew, I picked Slowpoke. This is mostly having to do with Shrew's real life speed, as he's very slow and unathletic and kind of dull like a Slowpoke. This one, I just want to get some jabs out. I mean, that was true for some of these teams too, but yeah, Shrew's a Slowpoke, slow to respond to texts about trades. I'm just joking. He's not always slow to respond to texts about trades, but this is more so like maybe have CJ Stroud being slow, or maybe his him not having a great running back room that's slow. I don't know. I came up with a whole bunch of different things in my head of why I think Shrew is Slowpoke. Up next, we have Beans. Beans, I have as Voltorb. With Beans, he has electric quarterbacks in Lamar Jackson and Justin Fields. Bijan, I think, is an electric player. And I also just think Beans really likes balls. That's really what it comes down to is Beans just likes balls. And he has some electric players on his team. Up next, we have Sokol. With Sokol, I picked Golem. Golem's a Pokemon that can hit pretty hard. Also has some weaknesses. And Sokol's quarterback room is nothing to write home about. Um, He's got a mix of some older and younger players, some good, some really good actually. Amon Ra's having a dope season. Jonathan Taylor's having a dope season. But yeah, there are some weaknesses. Just like the lower end of his flexes have not been great to start the year, and his quarterbacks haven't been great. So like Golem's a Pokemon that hits hard, has some weaknesses, and that's kind of how I view Sokol's team. Up next, I have Trevor as Kakuna, and with Kakuna, it is the evolution of the Pokemon Weedle. So last year, Trevor's team was kind of wimpy like a Weedle, but now it's currently in the process of evolving into a good team. And I have Kakuna as it being a middle stage, as Trevor's currently middle of the pack, although I did have him as fifth going into the season. I think there's a really real chance Trevor competes for a bye this year. I think his team's really good. But yeah, Trevor's team's currently in the evolution stage of going from a bad team to good team, which is why he has a middle stage bug, which used to be something wimpy, but is going to evolve into something better. With Stun, I picked Doug Trio. As I've previously mentioned, I think Stun has the deepest team in the league. There's a lot of mouths to feed. And Doug Trio has three mouths. A lot of mouths to feed with Doug Trio. That's the reason I picked Doug Trio for Stun. With Ryan, I picked Grimer. Ryan's team name is the Poop Hive. And Ryan's pretty grubby. Grimer's a pretty grubby Pokemon, pretty stinky, pretty gross, just like the way Ryan is. So Ryan's Pokemon is Grimer. For me, I picked Aerodactyl. Uh, Aerodactyl is a fossil Pokemon, old and ancient, and kind of like my team. I have a lot of older players on it, a bit ancient, but still, Aerodactyl's a good Pokemon, still gets the job done. That's why I went with Aerodactyl for myself. And then lastly, I have Chaz as Clefable. His Pokemon, I really was trying not to use everyone's uh, Pokemon from Frisbee days as part of the consideration here. But when I was going through the list of Pokemon, Chaz's team really does feel like Clefable to me. Just like a normal type. It's normally pretty good. Is better than you'd expect because I think Clefable is actually a pretty solid Pokemon. It's just nothing sexy, but I think Chaz has a pretty good team. And yeah, that's why I think about Clefable. And that is everyone's Pokemon. So hope I insulted all of you just enough to be angry about it. If I didn't, then I should have been meaner. I'm sorry. The whole point of this is for me to talk shit about your teams. I hope you talk shit back about mine. This is all in love and fun, though. I just want to remind everyone of that this is just all a game for fun. I know we take it seriously sometimes. I don't really know where I'm going with this. I just kind of started rambling. Thank you all for listening to the GDFL podcast. That is all I have for you today. Much love to all of you. I hope all of you talk shit and clap back at me in the comments and the group me, whatever you want. And I will see you all next time.